Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good to see you all here again, and officially to get the proceedings underway. Welcome to the 128th annual general meeting of the Grimsby Town Football Club. The proceedings today will follow the long-established format, formal proceedings, which I will endeavour to get through as quick as possible, and then an open forum for questions and answers following. Again, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the proceedings. There is one slight difference today. We do have one resolution on the agenda that is a special resolution, and I'm sure you're all aware that a special resolution requires a 75% majority rather than a 51% majority. I'll obviously give you some more details of that when we get to it, which is item 4. But generally the voting procedure throughout the meeting is the same as normal. The resolutions will be decided on a show of hands unless a poll vote should be called for. The poll vote can be called for by the chairman of the meeting, by 2 shareholders or 1 shareholder having more than 10% of the voting share capital. Other than that, I think the procedure is fairly straightforward. Nothing has changed. Just before I actually kick the business off, has anybody got any questions on that? Okay, thank you very much. So as normal, work through the resolutions on the agenda, a proposer and a seconder for each resolution. I always say I prefer that to come from the floor rather than from the top table, so if you please participate in that. Item 1 is to confirm the minutes of the 127th annual general meeting. Can I have a proposer and a seconder for the resolution, please? Okay, thanks. Now, the minutes, as usual, have been available for inspection for the statutory period. Does anybody have any questions on the minutes of last year's annual general meeting? Okay. All those for acceptance, please. And is there anybody against? Thank you very much. Item 2 is to receive the Director's report and audited accounts of the company for the year ended 31st of May 2019. So again, a proposer and a seconder, please. Okay, thank you very much. Again, the accounts have been available for the statutory period. I'll invite any questions on the accounts, if there are any.
How much did we actually get for them building from people?
You asked me that question last year, and the answer's going to be exactly the same. It's an undisclosed fee. It is an agreement between the 2 clubs. I think whilst some fans object to this policy, and I can understand why, it is becoming more and more commonplace in football that the agreement between the clubs is they do not wish to have the financial details of transfer dealings made general public for a variety of reasons. What I did say to you last year was that it would be in this year's accounts, which it is. If you look at player trading and work through the figures, you can have a pretty good guess exactly what the fee was. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you.
All right then. So, does anybody else have any other questions actually on the accounts?
Mr. Chairman, this year the media receipts have exceeded the match day receipts for the first time since 2002. This has enabled the club to reduce the deficit on the shareholders' funds.
Correct.
Bearing in mind the amount of money involved, can you tell us something about what the media income consists of, please?
Excuse me, the principal source of the media receipts are the monies that filter down from the Premier League. Obviously it's underpinned by the TV deals and all the commercial activities that the Premier League receives. Those monies then filter down to the leagues in different amounts. The Championship gets so much, League 1 gets so much, League 2 gets so much. The gap between League 1 and League 2 isn't actually that great. The big gap is between League 1 and the Championship. Excuse me one second. So, to a degree, we are beholden to the generosity of the Premier League as to how much filters down. But in essence, you're talking about circa £1 million that filters down. There are other media receipts. There are facility fees for TV and broadcasting fees when cup games are televised, then you get a facility fee for that. There are the facility fees for radio and TV, the BBC, etc. They pay annual fees. That is generally, again, negotiated between the BBC and the Football League. But the lion's share, 90-95% of the media and TV facility fees that you get is the money from the Premier League. Is that okay?
Yeah. In that 2002, of course, we had this ITV digital fiasco.
Yeah.
Are you confident that the income will continue?
It's an interesting question to answer. I mean, I've been of the opinion for many years that there has got to become a point in time when the continued income growth in football worldwide and the media income that generates has got to eventually hit a ceiling. And I've been saying that for 10, 15 years and it still hasn't. I think you've got to look at, there's a fundamental difference between the Sky and BT deals and the ITV digital. Excuse me, I do apologise. In my opinion, the ITV digital deal was flawed from day one. It was to promote lower league football, well, a bit careful how I say that, lower league football, not Premier League football, on, was it a Thursday night? When you'd got Sky matches on. Okay, there were not as many Sky matches on as there are at this moment in time. But what was the incentive? Where was the commercial reality of showing Division 1 and Division 2 football on a Thursday night midweek? I always thought it was flawed. So therefore, because the basic principle didn't have ultimately the financial support from the wider media to support the deal, it collapsed. It was a flawed deal, and I think you've got to look and say that whatever thoughts you may have on the exposure of football within the media, the fundamental aspects underpinning the deal are far more robust. And therefore, I cannot see that you are going to get to the stage whereby it would collapse. You may get a peaking in the support that they get and therefore the money that filters down to the other clubs. But an inward collapse like the ITV digital, I'm fairly certain would not happen.
Thank you.
Oh, excuse me. So, any other... Oh, yes, sir.
Could I ask about this debtors?
You can indeed.
Yeah. All I can see is a rising, it says trade debtors, that's gone up.
Yep.
Other debtors has gone up.
Yep.
Can we get some background information?
Yep. Picking up on the point that was asked about Mr. Dembele to Peterborough, trade debtors is principally arising from the company's basic trading activities. It's the commercial activities around the ground signs, advertising, sponsorship, all that sort of thing. When it's invoiced to customers and supporters, that is a trade debtor. When you sell a player, the transfer fee is a trade debtor. That is income that arises exclusively from your trading activities. So the reason it's gone up this year, Sirike was sold to Peterborough in June 2018. That money, as normal for any transfer deal, is paid over a period of time. So at May 2019, some of those funds were still outstanding. So that is why the trade debtors have gone up. There's nothing else untoward in that. With regard to other debtors, the principal reason for that, if you remember, I highlighted the year before. We had the situation whereby Mr. Mullins left the board. His loan was a director's loan at the time there was a director. When he left the board, he was no longer a director, so the money had to actually change hands within the accounts. I'll just query, as soon as you've raised it, if there's anything else. The other major component of that was the fact that at 31st of May this year, the money from the monthly instalment for the television deal hadn't actually come through till June. So whereas in the previous season we'd got it in May, it came through at the beginning of June, so it was provided for as a debtor. Other than that, is there anything else within debtors that you would like to ask about?
No. I've got a question about the hire purchase contracts. Can
Yep.
we get some detail on that? There's
You
nothing
can.
There's 4,000 and 4,500.
Yeah, during the year we had to purchase a new minibus for the youth side of the business. We thought about should we pay in cash or should we take it on finance. We got a very good finance deal underpinned by someone that helps to sponsor the club. It made commercial sense to take it as a deal over a 4-year period rather than use cash that was in the bank.
What's your name, please, sir?
John Edwards. John Edwards.
Nice to get some questions from the floor on the accounts.
Trying to find someone.
Sorry? You're trying to catch me out, though, aren't you?
How much time have you got?
Sorry?
I say, how much time have you
If you've got, look, seriously, at the end of the day, it is a formal meeting, but as a shareholder, you know, if you've got any other concerns on the accounts, please feel free to ask the questions. Okay?
Yeah. Well, you've explained the debtors situation.
Yeah.
Creditors, amounts falling due within 1 year. That's gone down. Can we have a bit of background on that?
Hang on, just 1 second. Are you looking at the global figure or the individual component parts of it?
I was just looking at there's one line, creditors.
Can you, can you just show me the sheet you're looking at?
Yeah.
That's all right. No, it's all right. It's fine. Yeah, that's okay. Right. Have you got the full accounts with you?
I haven't got the full accounts.
Right.
now.
Okay.
I've
Then.
got all
Right.
the accounts.
So, if we actually look there, in creditors in 1 year, we have the hire purchase contracts, which you alluded to, which was just over 4,000. Trade creditors, which is the reverse of trade debtors. It's the amount that suppliers we incur, so it's the trade creditors. That was 86,000. That had gone up a little bit in the year. There was corporation tax liability on the club this year, which is about 13,000. In case anybody wonders why we pay corporation tax when we make either a loss or a profit, it's on the rental income that we actually pay corporation tax. There's a specific system of losses. If you have losses, you can only use them in a particular manner. Even if you've got accumulated trading losses, you still have to pay tax on your rental income. So that's what the corporation tax is. Then the social security and other taxes, which I know is somebody's favourite topic at the end of the second row there, and that is the VAT and PAYE, social security. That is gone down about 30,000. Other creditors are things like loans and other bits and pieces that don't fit any particular category. A key component part, which has had a lot of press on social media, is the fact that directors' loans have gone down in the year by 250,000. 50,000 of that was Mullins, 200,000 was other directors' loans. Accrued expenses, they're items for which we know there's a bill coming, but we haven't had it by the end of the year. So that's pretty much the same as normal, about 20,000 more. And then we've got what we call deferred income. When people purchase a season ticket in May, the season doesn't start till August, so that income is carried forward. So looking at, there's no real changes from creditors from last year to this year other than the reduction in directors' loans. Okay?
Yeah. Now you've mentioned the loans, I don't know whether I'm allowed to ask the question. How much is still owed on the loans?
Exactly the same as in there.
It's in there, okay.
It's not changed.
This net liabilities, then I see, have gone down quite substantially. Is that due to the payment of the loans?
In essence, the net liabilities have gone down because the company traded at a profit. You can't look at profit in isolation. The figures that you've sort of asked about debtors and creditors and whether you're investing money in fixed assets, in players, or buying equipment, or spending money on refurbishment of Blundell Park, that all has an effect. But ultimately, the key driver that will reduce your net liabilities is operating at a profit. If you operate at a profit, your liabilities come down. If you operate at a loss, your liabilities will go up. It's a very generic overview, but principally that's the reason.
Thank you.
Okay? I'll be surprised if there's any more questions, but I'm always open. Anybody got anything else they'd like to ask? No? Okay. So, all those for the accounts, please? Anybody against? Thank you very much. Right. Item 3 on the agenda is to elect directors. So again, a proposer and a seconder for the resolution, please. Okay, now we've got two parts today. Obviously, from the accounts, you'll have picked up that Dave Roberts was co-opted back onto the board after the 31st of May. Dave, unfortunately, already had a pre-existing engagement down in London for this week, which means he cannot be here. Dave is clearly, I think, known to, I would suggest, everybody here. He's another representative from the Mariners Trust that will sit on the board. We're quite happy that he's back amongst us. We think it's a valuable addition to the board. So on that basis, he is going to be elected as a director. So does anybody want to ask any questions about that? Obviously a little bit difficult perhaps for me to answer with him not being here, but does anybody want to raise anything on that particular point? Okay, so all those in favour, please? And is anybody against? Okay. The second part is director's co-option. Now there's John, stands for re-election, his 3-year term is up, and Philip, his 3-year term is up. Now unless anybody would object, I'm proposing that we put them for re-election en bloc rather than individually. Is everybody happy with that? Yeah. Thank you. So, all those in favour, unless somebody would like either John or Philip to say anything at this juncture rather than afterwards, in case that, excuse me, I do apologise. So, on that basis, all those in favour of their re-election? And all those against, if there is anyone? Okay, thank you very much. Oh dear, I do apologise, I'm going to have a drink of water. Right, item 4 is a special resolution. This crops up once every 5 years. Being a public limited company, the directors have to seek authorisation from the shareholders to be able to continue to issue shares. Obviously, if the resolution isn't passed, we can't issue shares. So there are actually two elements to this. The first one is the general authority to actually issue shares, and the second is to disapply the preemption rights. Now, so to ensure that I explain the resolution properly, does anybody want me to explain what the preemption rights are, or are you happy to go along with putting the resolution to the meeting? Okay. Taking a situation that probably is extreme. There are, 2.3 million shares that are in issue at this moment in time. So if one of you, ladies or gentlemen, decided that you wanted to apply for £1,000 worth of shares, we cannot allot you those shares unless we give the other 2.3 million value of shareholders the opportunity to subscribe for an amount that's equivalent to that £1,000. So if someone had 1 million shares, they would have the exact proportion of £1,000 they would be able to subscribe for. If it was someone that had 100 shares, I don't know what the calculation is, but you're talking of a few pence. So it's the practicalities of being able to allot shares without on every share issue having to get the shareholders' approval to issue those shares without giving everybody the chance to maintain their percentage holding in the club. So practically, it makes nonsense if we don't have that authority. We really, in all practical terms, cannot issue shares to anybody. Is that fairly clear? Now, that disapplication of the preemption rights has been the case now for at least 15, if not 20 years, since the articles were changed and shares were once again made freely available. Because if you remember, there was a time when shares were not freely available to members of the public and supporters. That block was removed some years ago. But to do that, you need to have the flexibility to be able to give people whatever they want, basically, in shares, be it £100 or £1 million. You have to have that flexibility. So, on that resolution, does anybody have any other questions? Okay. All those in favour, please? And is anyone against? Okay, thank you very much. Right. Item 5 is to reappoint Weaver Roots as the company's auditors and to authorise the directors to determine their remuneration. Pretty much the same as normal. There's been no proposal to appoint anybody else other than Weaver Roots as the auditors, so they are as a consequence automatically reappointed. And I would assume that everyone is happy for the directors to fix their remuneration. Okay? We'll take that as a yes then. And then finally, any other business, as I always say, for any other business to be put on the agenda, it has to be served within 28 days of the annual general meeting. We've not received any notification from anyone that they want anything else to be brought up, so there is no other business. So at 20 past 10ish,
20 past.
we'll declare the annual general meeting formally closed and open the question and answer session. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks, Steve.
Any questions, please? Dave?
How's the new ground?
Got to be careful here because I've got two hats. Obviously being a councillor now, technically responsible for regeneration, I have to park that one side and talk specifically about the position where the club's at. It is clear that we wanted to relocate to Peaks Parkway, and it's also probably clear that as a result of the flats coming down in Freeman Street, it become less likely that we would get the political support to go to Peaks Parkway, which frankly was the club's preferred choice. I mean, it's virgin land, opportunity for enabling development, whether it be houses and part retail, whatever. That opportunity has been lost. Flats have come down. It is clear that certain politicians hung the hat on the club relocating to Freeman Street, and the Freemans undertook some work to do a few visuals and the likes to gauge appetite of the public, which was clearly very strong in support of regenerating Freeman Street. Now, the football club have then been faced with an alternative direction, and it's quite clear that the name's public, is Tom Shoots, and he has an aspiration to acquire the football club and relocate it onto the fish docks, which requires filling the dock in. He's got other aspirations for buildings around the town, and at this moment in time, those discussions are somewhat halted by the fact that you have to put your money where your mouth is, and so far that's not yet happened. So in principle there's an agreement to move forward. In terms of the board, we would like a little bit more comfort about his plans. There are some gaps. We need to be absolutely clear that the football club's not going to become indebted in a way that you could end up with such as another Bury. So there's quite a few gaps, and of course the financial commitment's not been met yet, so it's very, very difficult to see where that one's going. Put that on hold for the moment. So the options in play are potentially the fish dock, but probably Freeman Street. Now the football club are not precious where it goes, but the fact is that we do need to relocate. Our counterparts are enjoying higher income streams as a result of a better business case than we are. We are somewhat challenged by the car parking, getting people here. Whilst we've got reasonable function rooms, and they are pretty busy, particularly this time of the year with parties and stuff like that, with a new facility in a location where you could easily get there and park in reasonable numbers, you would drive up your 7-day incomes, which is an aim and objective for every football club in terms of supporting what's going on the field. So, just to close out, Dave, somewhat the Tom Shoots plans has really put back the club pressing forward with Freeman Street. And we really need to draw a line under it very, very quickly, and the board is working on that with a view to is it the fish stock, or should we be concentrating on Freeman Street? And the reason I say that is, if we just hang around and do nothing, and Freeman Street ends up becoming another solution, not necessarily a football stadium, but it's used for something else, we'll have missed out. So we are trying to put the pressure on to draw a line under whether the fish dock is practical or not, so that then we can start to get serious about Freeman Street if it falls down. So that's broadly where we are.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes,
Yeah,
please.
regarding the new ground again,
Yes.
and I know the man's not here, but does Mr. Shoots realise that he'd be on ABP land, or am I presuming something?
Yes. Yes, he does.
Well, would the Grimsby town own that area then, or would he still be paying out to ABP?
Yeah, these are all questions that the board need answering. In real terms, we don't know enough about his plan, his aims and objectives, in the detail that the club selfishly needs to know whether it's the right thing to do or not. So unless that is fulfilled, you can rest assured the board will not progress. And certainly, ultimately we're talking about acquiring my share block. I will not subscribe unless I'm happy, and further than that, I won't subscribe if the board aren't happy. There's got to be unanimous support for moving forward in whichever direction we go with regard to any interested parties coming on board. I will not selfishly walk away from this football club, unlock my value, for want of a better description, on the shares that I have, unless we're wholly comfortable. Individually, that's me, and in particular, the board. I will not do anything without the board's support. Okay. Yes, please.
You just mentioned the parking here. What parking facilities would there be at Freeman Street?
Freeman Street would
In
be...
numbers?
Yeah, indeed, it's a good question, because the business case for Peaks Parkway meant that we would at least have 1,000 parking spaces and possibly much higher. Clearly people like to drive to games, and if they've got if the weather's not good and there's not good parking, there's an excuse to possibly not come where otherwise you might have done if it was easy to get there. So it's a really good point you raise. Now, in and around Freeman Street, there's an awful lot of car parks which no doubt can play a role in satisfying this. And Freeman Street, when you actually put the footprint of a new stadium on it, it is fair to say that you won't have masses of parking. You'll have enough ancillary parking for coaches and maybe 200-300 parking spaces, which is much better than here. But naturally, there's Garibaldi Street car park. There's car parks at the rear of Railway Street. There's a lot of places where you can park in and around. You've also got some space that the Freemans have got as well at Wellington Street car park, albeit these places are up for discussion in other areas, which is a different hazardware. Yeah. Okay. Yes, please.
Just a couple of things on that. How do the Freemen feel about having a football ground put on their land? And secondly, it's on how I feel. I definitely think that the fish docks is the best place. You've got, and you said you'd have to fill it in. Well, you wouldn't have to fill it in, because you go to America, they've got, venues where volcanoes have been and all sorts of things have hit them. So it wouldn't, I don't think it's right saying you'd have to fill it in again. You could just go down, parking facilities, you get 5,000 cars, tons of parking facilities, off the main road, straight in off the flyover, straight in Grimsby Road, straight in, no thing to Freeman Street or anything. To me, it's only how I feel, being a supporter all my life, that I definitely think that the fish docks and would regenerate the fish docks in that area, as well as just build a football ground there.
Fair comment. I mean, issues on the fish dock is there isn't a footprint big enough for a stadium, and ultimately car parking will be constrained on the fish dock. No matter where you put it, if you fill the dock in, particularly the portion that we know about that's proposed, I suspect the substructure will cost another £5 to £8 million. If you look at what's happened with GFDE, which is the fish market, I was involved in that project early on, and I actually felt we should have moved out onto the outskirts of town at Europark or Great Grimsby Business Park, like my company did. Reason being is, it was hammered with huge rents, which applies today, and the dock was filled in to facilitate that. And even in the Bible it says you don't build on sand, and effectively it was sand pumped into the dock. There was a great big mountain of it, which was left to hydraulic, if you like, the water out of it and sediment it. Now, if you look at the subsidence that's gone on, they've probably laid the car park areas, which are massive, 3 or 4 times, and you've still got something like another metre drop since then. So incurring the on-costs has got to be considered as well. Now, clearly there are, there are engineering solutions to all of these things. But the point I'm making is it costs a lot of money to get right in the first place, and there might be quite a lot of cost associated with keeping it right if that's what you're going to do. Otherwise, it'll be an eyesore. So that deals with the fish stock. So we don't know where that stands. Will there be a rent? Will there be ownership? Will there be a long lease? Will it be peppercorn? We don't know the answers. And until we know the answers and come to, as a board, we can't move forward in that direction. Freeman Street, first and foremost, is not owned by the Freemans. The Freemans have got a nice idea here, and they really set sail without consultation to the football club, actually. I did ring one of the Freemen up and asked if I could drop the keys off. Maybe they'd like to run the football club in a jovial sense. Whilst we admire what they're doing, really they've got to consult the football club, because of course when that came out, we already had the fish stock programme, in train, if you like, some sort of 20 months ago. So it was very difficult for us to actually come out in support of that when we've got that going on. As I say, the football club's not precious about where it goes, but it needs to go somewhere. In terms of ownership, Links Housing Partnership own the site where the flats have come down, and of course that was Shoreline, and previous to that the council owned it. So there is a route in there. We have met with LHP actually, Philip and myself, so we sort of know how the land lies there, and what we mustn't do is spend more time on something that we can't understand. And we've really got to go back to Freeman Street if actually we've nothing better on the table. Okay.
So at this present time, right now, how do we stand on that? Are you going to say yes, we're going to go for that, or are we still in?
Well, the board actually on Thursday night were quite definitive about what they were going to say to the interested parties.
Right.
That now has been put. We have no answers to that yet. That will no doubt be flowing in the coming days. But the point is we have to close out on whether that's viable or not, and whether it's got board support or not, so that we can actually concentrate our efforts on Freeman Street. Or not.
So it looks like really Freeman Street is the...
Let's be quite honest, it's a great location for regenerating the town. It won't enjoy all the benefits of potentially Peaks Parkway, but beggars, we've got to go with what's on the table.
Right.
Okay, yes please.
Can I say, first of all, from a Liverpool perspective, my name is John Smith. I'm a third generation shareholder of Grimsby Town Football Club, but this is my first AGM. I'll give you a perspective on Freeman Street. I live less than half a mile away from the town's ground from here, and every fortnight on a Saturday I can't park my car and get my shopping in my house. I also am a business owner in Freeman Street, and my fear for Freeman Street, and I've put it to the councillors and I've put it to the enrolled Freeman, is that once a fortnight on a Saturday afternoon, a major shopping area that is under threat by the encroachment of the internet and everything else that you hear about the high street will be a no-go area for shoppers. The car parks will be full and people will stay away from my business. Now, fortunately, I'm old enough only to have 7 years left on my lease there, and I think it might take you that long to build a football stadium, so I'll be gone. That is my perspective on Freeman Street.
Okay, well, thanks for your question. I mean, football clubs have been used to regenerate such areas as Freeman Street all over the country, and it's worked well, and we need to be sympathetic to your argument, and ultimately we'll have to go through a planning process and demonstrate that it's got the modes of transport and actually the infrastructure to ensure that the two elements coexist, the football side and of course the retail side. It is a fact of life that retail is a moving feast. There's too much retail in all of the towns, and there's got to be found a different mix. And there's no doubt that football clubs have brought some additionality into those sort of locations to enhance the wider business. Whether it's good for your business or not, I don't know, but it certainly can be good for other types of businesses, particularly food outlets and drinking outlets and the likes. And of course it will drive up car parking income in the periphery, where obviously people do come, more easily than they could do
as a
now.
councillor, you might be for that, but in the
Well,
meantime,
they're not all council car parks, of course. Yeah.
but in the meantime, there will be a fairly strong lobby with a good platform of the death of the high street. I'm not a NIMBY. I live with a football ground.
Yeah.
It's half a mile from my doorstep. I was weaned at the Grimsby Town Football Club. But I have to say, I don't think Freeman Street is the right place for it. Not
Okay.
on the NIMBY.
Okay, understand. Yes, please.
Have we had any feedback from AB Ports? What's their views on?
I think it's fair to say that with my other hats on, yes, I've had direct meetings. What it really needs to remain behind closed doors. So yes, we know where they stand, but that's actually a private matter to do with the council, and it's not something that I've shared with the board, or can I? So if I can park that there, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, please. Hello, Peter.
As you know, I have an Aston Villa connection,
I do indeed.
and I was very disappointed when there was a memorial match for Graham Taylor, which was planned at Watford. They were having ground development, so it was moved to Villa Park. When I renewed my Grimsby season ticket, I did ask, would there perhaps be a coach? I was snapped at. No, she said, we've got our own match, that's our bread and butter. But Aston Villa knew that I was going and wearing my Grimsby Town shirt. They put me on the end of a row. Fans walking to the ground mentioned the Grimsby shirt. Stewards were checking everybody's bag except mine because they were learning the Grimsby link. After the match, 3 ladies ran down and said, we've done our research. We know why you're here. And we've come to thank you for coming all the way. Watford fans on the way to the station mentioned it. I went down to London, as I do every month, to see my own. Jeremy sat next to me and said, you've been to Villa Park. And he knew the Grimsby connection. What I'm saying is, when we have our pre-season matches, is there any chance of having a Graham Taylor memorial match, asking Aston Villa to be the opponents? On the one they had with Watford, a third went to the, I think, Watford Youth Development, a third for Aston Villa Old Players Fund, and a third to Graham's charity. And I know he used to take people to the Arboretum Old Soldiers at his expense when he was at Villa. And a Lincoln lady came up to start. Codhead, she said when she saw my shirt. I wish I'd worn the Lincoln shirt. If we couldn't get a pre-season match against Aston Villa to fund us and then etc., what about Lincoln? Because of their connections.
Sure.
And even Scunthorpe, you can have almost a three-way one.
Yeah.
And I say, I do promote Grimsby. When I've been over 20 odd people mention the Grimsby shirt on that day. And I let people know that I'm not from Birmingham, I'm from Grimsby. And the Aston Villa shares made me £3,000 profit when they were bought out.
Okay. Firstly, Peter, if I may say, thank you for representing Grimsby. I'm sorry to hear that you had your head snapped off. If there was some direction on that, then obviously I could look into that, and certainly we would. In terms of seeking to address the idea, I would suggest if we played Lincoln or Scunthorpe as an example, and Scunthorpe don't come into the Graham Taylor thing, but I'm just really making the point that there would be policing costs, and any sort of minimal incomes would be mopped up very, very quickly by the policing arrangements. So we'd have to be careful about thinking about Lincoln. In terms of Aston Villa, all I can ask is, Ian, can we give that some consideration, please, and talk to the counterpart at Aston Villa to see whether it's possible?
I can certainly make the call, but of course the Premier League clubs do have lucrative Far Eastern tours that they've already scheduled in, so that it's something we can certainly address and make the contact.
But it doesn't necessarily have to be a first string team, does it? It could be the under-23s or something of that nature.
Yeah.
So we'll ask the question, Peter, and I guess it's just a question of watch this space. Now, just returning to Graham Taylor, of course, when I take people round the stadium and we visit the changing rooms, which of course are the same changing rooms as they were when he was here, I fondly point out Graham Taylor's peg. So we still have his peg.
But as you know, and let you have a programme, at the time, the Villa programme when we played Liverpool a few years ago, Mariners was on the front page. There was a 2-page article inside about Mark Albrighton, and it was all about Grimsby Town because his mother was a Cleethorpes girl and supported Grimsby Town. And then once I had my 3 boys, we had lads, at a table tennis match. We went to the table tennis match via Villa Park. One of the lads was deaf and dumb. I wrote to Villa Park and said, any chance they didn't put lowest league scores on, of Grimsby Town score being put on the screen at half time, and they did.
Well done, Peter. Always flying the flag, I know that, and I know you two personally only so well. Thank you. Any other questions, please?
Well,
Yes, please.
regarding remembrance and things like that, just recently we've had the World War One and Two remembrance ceremonies. Could we promote the fact that Grimsby Town had some players in the First World War? There's a thing on the pontoon about it, but it doesn't seem to get promoted very much.
Okay.
In my opinion, anyway, I think it's something that the club, and especially as there's a link with Leighton Orient.
Okay.
Now, I'm not suggesting we have a testimonial match with them, but you know, I think it's something that ought to be highlighted a bit more.
Okay, I would have liked to have thought we did more than our fair share, and we certainly give it due consideration in terms of reaching back to all the lost people and you know, all the tragic circumstances around war and the likes. If there's any specifics where you think we're missing a trick, anybody who could come forward and you know, give us some direction in where you might think there's a gap, you know, we'd be only too happy to look at it. But I do, in all honesty, think we give it a lot of consideration in-house. We do things, and if it's not enough, or there's another direction or thing we could do, more than happy to receive ideas and comments on that. So, anything specific, please feed it back.
Well, I did send an email or a text to Peter Levy a couple of years back, and nothing happened. Not that I'm, it's not my favourite
Probably not
TV
controversial
station,
enough for Peter.
and Radio Underside isn't either. So yeah, I mean, I think they should do more on it as well. Yeah.
Okay, fair comment.
Can I just interject there, John? We did in August 2014, obviously the centenary of the start of the First World War, we did have a special programme for the first match of that season, and we did quite a lot, especially in connection with Wheelhouse, who was our captain and who was killed on the Somme. So we did do, at that stage, quite a lot.
Absolutely.
Name one of the bars after him as well.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I just turn to the Premiership and the support that they give to the lower leagues, if you like? I know it's been well and truly touched on. Philip might help me out here, but I think it's 132 million that is actually within a 3-year deal, and I believe that deal runs out at the end of next year. And we know that the EFL are deep in discussion about continuity and no doubt having aspirations for that to increase. In terms of its split, 80% goes to the Championship, 12% to League One, and 8% to ourselves. And with the cocktail of funds centred around that, it's circa £1 million, which Steve described, that we get. So the Premier League do their bit. In terms of the risk going forward of such as another ITV Digital, if that money dried up all of a sudden, I think there would be a problem. It would probably be a fairly short-term problem, because I do believe there'd be governmental intervention and there would be some slicing of their cake and forced passing of those funds down. So the Premiership are probably subservient to carrying on, possibly enhancing it, and I can't see a day that it will be taken away, them willingly offering it, because, as I say, there would be political intervention to probably force it to happen. Yeah.
Can I just add there, John? There is actually a solidarity agreement in place between the Premier League and the EFL, which came into being when the Premier League went off on its own. So that's been going. I think there was some question: is the Premier League money likely to disappear like ITV Digital did? Well, it's been going now over 25 years. The other thing we receive from the Premier League, which is not in the media income, is £400,000 towards our academy. So That's getting on for £1.5 million
Yeah.
we received.
And also the checker trade money's on top of that as
Yeah.
well. So that 132 million I mentioned, it might be 129, 132, forgive me, but it's a big figure. That is part of a 3-year deal, which does run out shortly. But I do know that they're in discussion to hopefully increase it. Yes, please.
Presumably, if we were relegated, we would lose that, would we? Or is there some...
There are some parachute payments. I think it's a full payment first year and 50% second year.
Yeah, but it's not it's a full payment are only of your EFL payment,
Yeah.
not the television money.
It's the solidarity.
You don't get the solidarity
Yeah.
payment,
Okay.
so it's basically
So it's
50% of
vitally
half
important
what
to
we
stay in the
get.
league,
Well, of course it's important to stay in the league.
but even more so.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the money's very important, but of course, if you do go down, you reduce your costs according to your income streams. And whilst we're in the whilst we're in the conference, we probably lost money the first year, and thereafter, one way and another, we had good cup runs. We went to Wembley, and though in an overriding sense, financially, it was quite good for the football club. Nobody would ever want to go back there, let's be quite honest, but don't feel that because you lose those income streams, all of a sudden we're saddled with huge losses, because you adjust your costs accordingly. Yeah. Yes, please, Dave.
New manager.
I'm surprised that took us long.
Wise to appoint a new manager well before the January transfer window opens, so we can get a look at the squad.
Sure.
And see what he what he thinks he needs.
Sure. I mean, at the moment, obviously, we've asked Anthony to take up the caretaker role. We brought Ben Davis in to assist him. That's gone down really well in-house. I think it's fair to say, of the 3 performances since Michael left, we've seen increasing better performance, if you like, increasingly better performances. I think we're passing the ball better. We're certainly giving ourselves an opportunity to score goals. The sad part is we've not been able to exploit that, because probably the last 2 games, in truth, we deserve 6 points, not 1. So the question is, as a board, where do we go from here? What we've said to Anthony is we're pleased with the upturn in performance. We can see what's going on in-house. There is certainly a big lift. There was a cloud, and that's lifted. And we've asked him to concentrate on preparing the side. He's got 11 days now since Tuesday night's game to prepare the team, where otherwise it hardly been able to impact because of the games that were coming thick and fast in terms of training sessions. I think he'd had 4 or 5 training sessions. He's got an opportunity really to forge his own ideas. As a board, what's important to us is that through difficult times, we're looking to a manager to tell us what they think is wrong and how they would right it. What I would like to say in that context, we feel that Anthony understands those 2 things. He's put his case to us, and as long as we believe in that story and we can actually see some progress, then maybe we should just give him a little bit more time. So we've asked him to work on preparing the team for the next 11 days since Tuesday, and the objective is hopefully we can build on the draw and turn that into a win. So we're not suggesting for a minute that we're not looking. A huge number of applicants has come through, but we're certainly not going into the interview round, and we're not targeting particular managers that may or may not be in work at the moment just yet. So I think there is broad support from the fans for Anthony so far, and I think we're all on the same page. If we can get behind him, get behind the team, which generally the fans do, let's be quite honest. We've got some brilliant fans, particularly away, where they just sing come what may and get behind the players, which is terrific, and one of the reasons why sometimes we do better away from home. So we're not suggesting that we're going to jump out of the frying pan. We would like to see how it pans out over the next 11 days, and of course game by game, really. Yes, please.
Yeah, just a quickie. What I would like to say is, a few weeks ago I come to see the youngsters playing on Blundell Park on a Tuesday night, I believe it was, and I'd like to say that they're the best bunch of youngsters I've seen at Grimsby Town, and I've been coming some years for many years. Not just the odd individual, as a group of young players, and I think I can honestly say they're the best group, and we should be really looking forward to bringing them forward, and I hope they continue in the way that they're doing now.
Yes.
Because we've got some terrific youngsters in that squad.
Yeah.
As a whole, not just one odd individual, not Harry Clifton or one of those, as a squad. And I just wanted, at the end of that game, it was a miserable, horrible Tuesday night, but I wanted to shake every one of them's hand, because I felt that proud of them all. And I just want that to say that about the youngsters at the club at present, and I think they're the best group of youngsters we've had here for many years.
Okay, well, thank you for that kind support and kind words. That's brilliant, and to be fair, we concur with that. Philip's responsible for the academy side of things, but if I might just touch on football philosophy, we've been speaking as a board about where is it going. And if you look at salary cap management, which probably is a good thing in football, you're less likely to see more berries, going out of business and ending up in no man's land. So we're actually in support of salary cap management. It's gone from 55% of eligible income down to 50% of eligible income this year, not wanting to sort of engage just right now what is eligible income, which means ultimately clubs are going to have more money to spend on other things, such as youth programmes, such as facilities, in an effort to drive the business case better. So it's a good story. We've now got a situation where you have to, well, it's optional, but if you're going to have the 7th sub, you have to have a youth player in there. We've had reasonably good success with Akeem, obviously Max, Harry, Matty's come through, Joe Starbuck's on the periphery, we've got one or two others on the periphery. So you're talking really about the layer below that, which is fantastic news. Now, we've been able to invest as a result of the controls at this football club substantially in the floodlighting, in the heating of the main stand. There's some huge investments here, keeping Blundell Park probably the best it's ever been for the last sort of 40-50 years. You go around the place, we've got disabled toilets, we've got stair lifts now. We're making the best of a bad job, for want of a better description. And as much as people might think that we're not doing so well in this area, I would suggest go and stand on the centre spot, look round, and compare it with a club that we visited recently, Northampton, which is a shiny new stadium, but for one stand's not finished. And we use football, and that oozes tin shed. In comparison, dare I say, I'll probably get picked up somewhere on this. But this is a real football club, and we've got to make sure in the transition to a new club we don't just turn it into a tin shed. So we're very proud of what's here, and we do look after it as well as we can. And in the context that Peaks Parkway was knocked off plan, we had to make those investments I've just talked about. We've invested heavily in the youth academy, in the facilities. We've got fantastic changing rooms. We've got a relationship with Oasis School Academy, Wintringham that is, and we use their, we actually rent facilities off them in an arrangement, so we've got good pitches there. Obviously we've got our own training ground. There's been significant investments, making the best of a bad job. We've got some really good facilities there, in truth. So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes, and as a result of salary cap management, it brings you back to where is football going. We've got the youth academy looking like it's going to bear more and more fruits, and you point to that. And the question for the board is, if with this movement, this progression in football, do we have to think about our management structure differently? And that's what we're considering now. As an example, should we have a head of recruitment, so that when you do change your manager, whether the manager goes off because things have gone well, whether it gets headhunted, or ultimately whether you deem you want to change, you tend to then have wholesale player change. Now that can't continue in perpetuity, and I think because of the amount of investment in the youth setup, we need to see some stability. We need to see a club policy probably underpinning head of recruitment, and then head coach and assistant coach. Whether you call them managers or not is a different question. The titles at the end of the day. But we can see, for the purpose of continuity and not having this wholesale change when you change manager, that we need to think maybe differently about this. Now that's in consideration, and of course we've already talked to the team in-house about that, and they understand and actually feel that that would make sense. So I hope that sort of clarifies where we're going in that area. Yes, please.
Why did we sell this young lad to Middlesbrough? Why didn't we keep him?
Well, we take advice from in-house. Obviously, we speak to Neil about these things. We speak to the manager in situ at the time, was Michael. And ultimately, we look at what's on offer, and we also look at the strength of our position in terms of, is it contracted? Are we in a strong position or a weak position? When we looked at that all in the round, we obviously decided that we would accede to an offer that's become acceptable to us. Now, obviously, there's bells and whistles attached to that offer, and hopefully it'll make the progress that we'd all like to see him make. So, sometimes you're faced with being forced into these situations as a result of your contractual position, if you're with me. Reading between the lines, yes, please.
Couple of questions. First of all, you mentioned the 11 days that Anti-Limbic's got now to work with the players.
Now, that's not a deadline, it's not a guillotine.
Well, that was sort of the answer to the question I was going to... What in your mind is the period that you want to give him? Because if you put a manager under the situation, you win the next game or you're out on your ear, then everybody's under pressure and nobody works under pressure.
Yeah, it's a really good point you make, and it's absolutely clear. We've said to Anthony that he's got our back in. He's now got 11 days to prepare the team. That was just a figure of speech, if you like, where he's only had 5 single sessions for the duration he's had it now. So really, that was just giving him the encouragement to get on with business as usual, and we're looking to see the progress over and above, where you've already got, which is we've seen better performances game by game.
And another one, just on the issue of the youth setup. And over the past few years, we've seen managers come in. We've never seen anybody coming through the youth setup at all. They've come in, they've done the YTS and all the rest of it, and then they've been let go. Under Michael Jolly, he was bringing some players in, and also under Anthony Limbic, he's still playing the young players. If we don't have Anthony Limbic and we get a new manager coming in, and it's an established manager, is he going to want to go back to the safety first, the old players, and are we going to lose the youth players coming through?
This is the very reason why we're talking as a board about this particular issue. Wholesale change is never going to be an answer, and we're not going to see the benefits of the youth academy coming through if we continue to have a manager that comes and goes for whatever reason, and then we have a wholesale change. Let's say we bring a new manager in now, and that's not what we're talking about, because of we've explained ourselves in that regard. He's going to turn around and he's going to say, I don't want him, and him. He got the last manager the sack. And actually, we might, as a football club, think, really, we want you to work with what you've got, but you will see to this wholesale change again, because you accept the manager's advice. If we put a head of recruitment in place, call it director of football. I mean, that's a swear word to most managers. So it's just about titles, really. Now, they've got to clearly have a good relationship, but there's also got to be a backing of club philosophy. And the drive for all football clubs, with the amount of investment we're making in the youth academy, should be to bring youngsters through. So you might see an opportunity where we're getting more and more youngsters through, and actually you're left with the ability to invest more heavily in key players, hopefully to make the difference. Now, we did in part work on that basis this season. So far, beginning of the season, it looked like it was going really well, and of course the last 16 games it's been a struggle for us. So it's a question now of how we reinvigorate those players and get out of them what we did in the first 10 games or so. And there is belief in the camp we can do that. We don't need wholesale change. So it's steady as she goes, and thorough backing for Anthony. Okay. Any other questions, please? Yes, please.
I apologise if this sounds frivolous, but since I started coming in 1950, there's a lot at Blundell Park that hasn't changed. But come August, I would like to congratulate the club on the vast improvements that have been made to the ladies' facilities and the main stand. It is almost like being in a five-star hotel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do remember in 2005-06 when I first became chairman, I had a nice lady come and approach me just like yourself, and she said, Mr. Fancy, I'm really pleased you become chairman because the toilet door's sticking and I knew I'd arrived. Yeah. Any more questions, please? Yes,
Could
please.
I just congratulate you and the board on the new lights? What a vast improvement they are. And especially the playing service in front of each goal. We're not playing snooker anymore. But I really was impressed with the lights on Tuesday night.
Yeah.
They really do show it up the ground.
Yeah. Not an inexpensive affair, and obviously we held it off as long as we dared. The next two sections of those towers were not in great shape, I can tell you that from personal experience, and hanging in and around them when we've been remanufacturing the lights to keep the best of a bad job going. We had to bite the bullet, we've made the investment, but equally those heads can be transposed to a new facility, so all is not lost. We basically the painting of the structures and so on, and the existing structure you'd leave behind, but you'd facilitate the reintroduction of them in a new facility that you design afresh.
Do they use less electricity than the previous lot?
Not really, because we've got a lot more light now,
Yes.
and in real terms the bills will probably be slightly higher, albeit the more efficient. We've got a lot more light, so it's worse than quid pro quo, to be fair. But we did have a light level to looks up to, and effectively we were well below that, and we were sailing close to the wind, frankly, keeping the best of a bad job going, and now we easily meet that, and we've also got the ability to go up to 1,000 lux as well. We can actually make them even brighter, which, daft as it sounds, can be controlled by your telephone.
Yeah.
Is it possible to have one of these fancy light shows through them that start some of these big games?
Yes, see the one at Wolves?
Yes.
It's fantastic, where you got dancing lights to the music and bringing the fans on board.
Is that possible?
Not quite.
No.
It was a fairly big expense already, I can tell you.
Not GT,
On the floodlights, excuse me.
Yes.
How many people in this room have seen what it says on them before they put them to full strength?
The GT.
Yes.
Yeah. It's probably not the best impression of GT, but we can start the evening with just GT displayed on each of the lights. Again, that's controlled by the telephone, so it's a bit of a novelty. Yeah. Okay.
Just on the lights, it might spoil the party a bit, but where I sit, there's two lights on the Findus roof, or just underneath it. They keep shining in my eyes. I just make that point.
Yeah. I'm afraid every light is adjusted to ultimately. Thank you. It is ultimately adjusted to achieve the light lux levels that we need. Every area of the map, the field is mapped, and every square metre is measured. We have to get the lux levels that's required across the patch, albeit some slightly brighter than others, which is tolerable. You've got to have the minimum levels everywhere. I don't see us being able to adjust the lights, and maybe you could put a big cap on or something like that.
Well, I'll just keep looking down there.
Good man. Let's hope we keep it on the deck.
Well, ladder.
Yeah. Yes, please.
On the upper young stand, which is up here, both ends, there's been 6 plastic panels taken out.
Yeah.
I think it's to give access for the people at the top to be able to see the goals.
Okay.
But an instant last year, when there was a southwesterly wind, a southeasterly, northwesterly wind, and it rained, about 70 people got wet through on this end of the stand.
Yeah. I'll let you into
Are there any comments on that?
I'll let you into secret. I got soaking wet as well in the middle. I don't think it was just as a result of those perspex cladding being missing. Funnily enough, we were talking about it the other night. Should we replace them or should we not? Clearly there's a big cost involved. A lot of health and safety in doing that as well. We'd have to bring some kit in to see that through. We haven't got an aspiration to change it. It's a one-off, I'd like to think. Hopefully it's not going to rain like that, but I think, to be fair, everybody in the ground got soaking. We certainly did where we sat, and it wasn't as a consequence of that, those perspex cladding being broken. Okay. We want to try and spend money usefully where we can, for obvious reasons. Any other question, Peter?
Sorry, before the next question,
I
I need
know
to head off.
fundraising can sometimes be difficult, and I always did support the one where we gave £1 a goal, and then it ran and it stopped, and then it ran again. Any chance of bringing that back in?
We're always looking at innovations, Peter, to raise funds and contribute and give people a reason why they should want to engage. Ian, did you pick that up? We can take that back for consideration. Once again,
the
Peter.
tickets that we sell before the announcement of the winning numbers is often not very clear. It doesn't say what the second and third prizes are.
Okay.
So I don't bother to buy them. When we were at Eastbourne a few years ago, I bought 3 of theirs because it was helping a little club.
Okay.
But I know you need ways and means of raising a bit of money in a variety of ways.
Okay. Peter will take that back.
It is put up on the scoreboard.
On a scoreboard.
They are on the scoreboard.
You can't see the scoreboard because everyone's
Yeah, not everybody can easily see that scoreboard. That's accepted. So what you're saying is you'd like to hear it more over the tannoy. Is that where you're coming from?
The loudspeaker system isn't brilliant in mine.
Okay.
Shout.
It's not the same as Aston Villa, I do accept.
I sit in the pontoon, John, and the tannoy system, or whatever you call it nowadays, is absolutely terrible.
Whereabouts do you sit?
Middle of the pontoon, right at the back in the pontoon, and it's been like it for years.
Yeah.
You'll go in one game and you can just hear it. The next game you can't hear a thing.
Yeah, well, one of the problems we have is when the ground's quite empty, Tuesday night, dare I say, it's very clear, and then when you fill up, it has a detrimental effect on the sound levels coming through the speakers. You need to make adjustments, and we do struggle to manage that well. As much as we're making the best of a bad job, I do believe it can be a lot better than it is, so fair comment, we'll take that back and we'll look at that. Some more simple means of cranking it up when the fans come in, more numerically, would be a sensible solution. We've looked at it before, and I have actually got an intervention in mind that we're going to bring to play, albeit you'll prompt that, and we'll have a look at that. Thank you.
I see it's improved in the main stand.
Yeah, we have introduced a lot more speakers to try and, we have this problem where the neighbours don't want it, so we're fighting that tussle. On a night game, we get massive backlash from neighbours, so you're limited what you can do. And then, of course, there's people in the stadium that don't want noise, don't want it, and we've had considerable abuse actually when they've been loud. And then, of course, we've got those people that complain about not being able to hear it. So what we did was we introduced a lot more speakers to try and bring the level down, but make it more acceptable, and spread the sound, if you like. I think we can crank it up a bit. That's really where you're coming from.
I can sometimes hear it in this stand and all the other 3 stands around the ground, but the one actually in the pontoon, you can't hear a thing.
Okay, all right. Point taken, thank you. Yes, please,
It's
John.
not AGM business, but if I could have a personal word with you, Mr. Fenty, after the meeting,
Sure.
I would appreciate it.
No problem at all. Thank you. Any further questions, please?
Yeah, sorry to go back to the new ground situation, but can you give us any insight into how much we can get towards it from the FA? You mentioned earlier how much we get on a season basis.
Yeah.
But I know the figure of 20 million was how much would the EFL and the FA be?
You're talking about grant facilities, financial.
Yeah.
There's very little support from that neck of the woods for the professional game. If you've got a community playing pitch you want or something of that nature, the FA are very supportive. But when it comes to the professional game, they just become completely detached. There's no funds from there. There is a stadium improvement fund. We've used some of that money actually to complement the works we've done here. There is little left because the original slug was used to regenerate the pontoon stand, which some here might remember, and make it all seating and so on. Put the new planks in, although the same outside structure remained. A lot of money was spent, I think about 2.1 million in. So there was originally a pot of 4 million available to us. That's been substantially eroded, and actually it was also reduced by the Stadia Fund Investment Board. So there's not much of that pot left. So in terms of relocation, we've got to find funding from elsewhere. Clearly the council have said they're very supportive, certainly our predecessors. Ultimately that is a matter for the council which I step outside of for obvious reasons in terms of declarations of interest, whilst I remain involved at the football club like I am. Okay. Any other questions, please?
Well, I've got a couple of things that I'd like to raise. Regarding shareholders, and I know that the ground's limited for space, but I know we get a bit of concession towards trust members and season ticket holders, but there doesn't seem to be much for shareholders. Is there any chance of getting something, I don't know, in the way of reduced ticket prices or a bar area or something like that?
It's an interesting point you raise. I don't think it's a movement, a direction we want to go in all honesty. Steve mentioned about the resolution today, and it was actually a resolution that I wanted to bring forward because I wanted to see wider ownership. I do believe in fan participation, that's what we are. Ever since we brought that resolution forward and periodically, I think it's every 5 years, refreshed it, the objective was to get wider ownership of the football club. But in terms of offering concessions to these sort of 1,250 or so shareholders, it would be phenomenally complex, and I don't see what we could do in that regard, in all honesty. But you know, you've got a piece of the football club. In reality, it's a fan-owned football club. That's what it is now. You know, we're just custodians that's here for now, and our objective is to make sure that there's you know, longevity and something there for future generations, which is what we're about. Hence the reason we don't behave foolishly in terms of the way we fund the football club. Okay. Yes, please.
Do we do anything to sort of get people pushing people to buy shares?
We're not allowed to. I mean, effectively, we're not allowed to promote the sale of the shares, but if actually anybody comes forward and wants to buy them, then they can do.
I mean, there could be a lot of people out there who would, but don't know anything about it.
Sure. I mean, we do sell quite a few. You've probably seen the register increase. I'm not sure what the number was, but each and every year there is a raft of shares sold, which are identified in the accounts.
Can I pick up on that?
Yes,
point?
please.
Yeah. This was a question that someone asked me a couple of years ago about promoting shares, and it is a bit of a thorny subject. We are a public limited company. Now, you might argue that we're not like ICI don't exist anymore, you know, BP or whatever, but the rules that apply to quoted companies basically apply to us as well. So if you actually actively sell or promote shares to the public, you cannot do that without a prospectus. I'm sure some of you are very familiar with what a prospectus is. It's a very detailed document. If you're actually trying to persuade someone to part with the money to invest in a company, you have to comply with the rules. The prospectus we looked at some time ago when we were trying to promote a reasonably buoyant share issue. Now, historically, what we found is that when you try and generate interest in the shares, there'll be an initial interest, but it then very quickly falls away. And I defy anybody to suggest that that doesn't happen. I've done it a number of times with Grimsby Town. That's exactly what happens. You get that initial peak and then it filters away. So you have to weigh up what do you think you're going to get in by promoting the shares in a formal way versus the cost of a prospectus, which is about 20 grand. So you've got to weigh the two up. Now, I knew this was going to crop up as a question at the annual general meeting as it happened, and I was advised properly by a lawyer, if you actually stand up at the annual general meeting and say shares are available, you're actually breaking the law. That is how stupid it is. So we've tried all sorts in the way of in the programmes, in the press and reporting. In that particular AGM, the Grimsby Evening Telegraph was there, and I suggested perhaps you'd like to make that specific point in your report of the AGM to get over the fact that shares were available. I've seen quite a few posts on social media recently regarding buying shares in the club. It followed on from an interview that John gave, and someone posted, why can't the public buy shares? And one or two answers came in. Well, you can do. All you've got to do is write in, apply for the shares, and you'll get them. And that is one of the issues that we have about our public limited company status. We would like to promote wider share ownership, but we're not allowed to do it. Now, can anybody explain the logic of that to me? Because I would suggest that anybody who buys shares in their local football club isn't really making any investment. Are they? They want to buy shares in their football club. They want to buy their son or their nephew. Now, what I'm really doing here, on YouTube, is getting the message out there for everybody that's going to watch this later on tonight. Shares are available,
but not for sale.
Well, on that note, I'm going to sit down.
Thank you, Steve.
That's all right.
That's just one of the conundrums of being a PLC, and there are many more actually. At some stage in the future, if we don't find a way forward in the near future with interested parties, we will be coming to you to talk about removing the PLC status. It is dogging us and causing us cost in certain areas. It won't change anything. There'll still be shareholders meetings, AGMs and the likes, but we're not ready really to talk about that in detail today. Okay, are there any further questions?
Just make a comment rather than a question. What Michael Jolly supposedly said about a radio oversight, I more than likely fully agree with it. Don't agree with the F words and all such, that shouldn't have been, because that's our club being represented it. But what he said about radio oversight, yeah, I agree. Look for any negative for our club, and anything positive they don't want to know.
Okay.
And that's why this side of the river we call the whole radio, not radio oversight.
Sure. The secret to it is to win games. Yes, please, John.
I take it that what you're saying is you're looking to moving away from being a PLC to a company limited by guarantee.
It would be an ordinary limited company.
Yeah. It was limited by shares. I mean, obviously, excuse me, I'll stand up and pick up on the point. You're obviously aware that there are two vehicles, a company limited by shares and a company limited by guarantee. Well, clearly, if the registration, what it actually is you don't as such change the status of the company, you change its registration.
No, I understand.
Clearly, we are a company limited by shares. You, as far as I'm aware, could not change that to a company limited by guarantee. It really, in our environment, would not work. There is a very subtle difference. You sign a guarantee which commits you to pay an amount in the future. That would be a nightmare to administer. So even if you could do that, which I don't think you can, clearly it would be a similar status, a company limited by shares. In essence, nothing would really change dramatically. Certainly what would change is not for discussion at today's meeting. It would be something that you would have to discuss with the shareholders in a general meeting, convene specifically to actually get the shareholders' approval to change the registration.
Yeah, obviously you understand.
I do.
As a shareholder.
Yeah, that's fine.
Went to a company limited by
it wouldn't make
guarantee.
any. It wouldn't make any difference.
If it went to a company limited by guarantee, then we will be liable to some extent.
No, you wouldn't. No, what?
Nothing changes.
Nothing would change. I mean, obviously, with a company that's limited by guarantee, you set what the amount of the guarantee is going to be it £1 or £10. Most often used with charities and other community-based type companies, and all you're really doing is committing that if the company did at some point in time cease trading, that you commit yourself to an amount to basically pay off the creditors. Clearly, given the nature of football, that would not work. I mean, I'm not talking here about an organisation that may be more fan-based, where if it's a fan-owned club similar to, I don't know, Wickham or some of those other clubs, I don't know how they're constituted. It might work in that environment, but given that we already have about 1,300 shareholders, I really don't think that is a viable way forward, let's put it that way. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, are we done?
Probably only two more.
See you again.
Years ago, when I first started watching the town, everybody used to come on and buy. now, and you spoke earlier about people prefer cars, but I still come on a bike, and there's no bike stands outside the main stand entrance. Could we have some, please?
We do have some bike stands.
I know, but I don't want to park my bike there and walk round there, but yeah, that's just the point. The other, I don't know if there's any more questions, but I was going to try and finish on the fact, it mystifies me why we haven't got a chairman. Is the chairman's seat open, available, or is it likely to be filled in the future?
It is. What do they call me? I'm the non-chairman. I'm quite fond of that title, actually. Look, by virtue of my shareholding and loans, I'm deemed to control the football club. As a result of that, we've not chosen to, if you like, choose a chairman. But when all's said and done, I do chair the board meetings, and I am the spokesperson for the football club as agreed through a protocol agreement in terms of how directors behave. At some stage, I suspect that will change. It might be when an interested party takes over potentially or whatever. But I'm not suggesting it's broken really, and I quite like the name that's fondly given to me, which is non-chairman. It's a bit of a joke, I guess, so I accept that as it's given. Okay. It's not broken. I mean, you don't have to have a chairman in any company. It's just really a figurehead that's more likely to get the blame for everything, and I think that lands with me in any case. Okay. Any further questions?
Cycles got mentioned. As a younger man, I cycled all the way to Colchester towards Grimsby town today, and all the way to Middlesbrough. Well, I didn't actually get asked to say at the youth hostel at Whitby they've got a bus to Middlesbrough. I cycled to Ruby Town matches.
Great achievement, Peter.
How times change.
Indeed, don't they?
How times change.
Okay, if it's okay, then we'll draw the meeting to a close, and thank you for coming once again.